we're taking a look at an interesting part of Scripture. You know how you fly over, you see the large terrain, and then if you get right down and take a look at one tree, that's kind of what we're doing here with Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. We're looking at a moment during the time of the Judges. So we've looked at the Judges. Last week was Samson. And so now we're taking a look at Ruth. It is 4 chapters of a personal story that happens in history that illustrates how much God really cares for us. And I want to start in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. Do you know that the genealogies of the Bible are a really serious recommendation to the authenticity of the Bible? You ever said to somebody, hey, there's some people that don't like you, and then a person goes, well, who? Well, I can't say. You ever had that happen? Yeah, of course you have. See, in the Scripture, they don't play games. They tell the truth. They tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and it is by God. So understand these details really matter, and they're there to give evidence to the absolute perfect nature of the Scripture. So, there's 2 genealogies in the New Testament. This is Matthew. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, and Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Abinadab, and Abinadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab. Isn't that cool? And Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth. Notice that these 2 ladies are brought in there. And Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. So Ruth is a part of the genealogy of Jesus. I just love, in my family, they don't tell the real story. Huh? You notice that? I don't recommend that. It doesn't make the kids think a lot of you when you lie to them. My family told me my grandfather died of diabetes. Well, he died of cirrhosis of the liver because he's an alcoholic. My grandparents were divorced. My Uncle Charlie was left orphaned. But nobody tells that story. They tell another story. And what I want you to understand is the Bible tells it very straight, very straightforward. Okay? I'm trying to think of a way to illustrate this for you. Because Ruth is not a Hebrew. She's a Moabite. That's kind of like marrying a Raiders fan if you're a Chief fan. Or whatever you think is as a Chief fan, And so I want you to understand this, because you see that Ruth becomes married to Boaz, and the child they have, which is Obed, becomes the father of David's father. And this is very important because the Scripture has laid it out very clearly that these things really, really matter. And I want you to see, this is Moab, and this is where they end up. And some really bad things happen there while they're in Moab. Now, the boys married Moabite women, and then they died. The father died, and the sons died, and it leaves Naomi and 2 daughter-in-laws left alone. And so Naomi is going to go back home. And this makes perfect sense. And she gives the option of her widowed daughter-in-laws to step away, because a widower in Bethlehem is not exactly a glamorous life, especially if you're a Moabite. Okay? And so this is a neat thing about her, because she gives them the chance to go on. There's a lot of selflessness and a lot of sincere kindness in the book of Ruth and in Naomi. And this happens during the time of the Judges, which you've seen the Judges, you know, they're pretty funky. That's Greek for strange. And they really, you know, do some very difficult things at this time. But here's this moment. So always remember this, okay? No matter how dark it is in relationship to faith in God, there are always those that are shining bright. God always has his remnant. So even in the time of Judges, there's a wonderful thing happening in a family that's living through some difficulty. Now, they travel back to Israel, to the land that they're from, and one Moabite daughter-in-law decides to step away. But Ruth sticks with Naomi. She sticks with Naomi, and she comes back. And they come back to where they were from, and she comes back, and her family is somewhat the tribe of Judah. The tribe of Judah. Now that's important, because who will come from the tribe of Judah? Yeah, Jesus. So they go back there, and it's during the barley harvest, and we have these 2 widowers, and there was not a lot of, provision and sustenance and care. And just like today, kids that are orphaned, kids that are abused, it's tough. And not everybody can take it on. To be widowed, and to be a foreigner, and to have to travel back, and so on and so forth. You can just kind of see the difficulty. And so I want you to get this. Now, if you'll notice, here at 1294 is Naomi. So if you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it all the way back there. Sit up front, it's a lot easier to see, by the way. But anyway, there are a lot of chairs right here. But anyway, so this is where Ruth is. So they're coming into the period of the Judges. And to kind of give you an idea of how these chapters lay out, the tragedy and difficulty that they start facing, and Naomi's direction and trying to let her girls go and have a decent and better life, concerned that they would. And so they travel back. And what happens with Ruth is a miracle. It's a miracle. It is a supernatural occurrence of God. And so, you can see Ruth's devotion to Naomi in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16 through 17. After all that has kind of taken place, Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die." Now, it's interesting because she's saying your God would be my God. She is literally going to be the lineage of God in human flesh. Isn't that amazing? Remember, God takes people who are not and makes them his. God takes people who are not and makes them his. Okay? Everyone who comes to Christ is born again, not naturally, supernaturally. And so, God will indeed become her God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. By the way, this was in my wedding, but I was a fairly brand new Christian. I had no idea about this passage. I just remember my wife wanted it in there. I was like, okay, fine. I just wanted my wife. That's all I wanted. I wasn't interested in the wedding, actually, like most men. But the reality is that this passage was in there, so it's always kind of been something special to me to some degree. And it was very special, of course, to Pammy. So she stays with Naomi, and they travel back to Judah, and they come back at the barley harvest, and she just happens to be picking up the leftovers, and she comes across a guy named Boaz. This kind of reminds me of when I was a kid. I got in a fight at school. I don't remember what it was about, but I just remember I got in a fight. And my principal sent a note home to my mother to let her know how wonderful her son was. And he put the name of the kid that I fought. And his name was Shad. S-C-H-A-D-D. And his family owned a TV sales and repair store in Marietta, Ohio. And when I got home, I gave the note to my mom, and she read it, and she said, "David, do you have any idea what you've done?" "Not really." She said, "This is your cousin." I said, "Well, he is a big-nosed cousin now." But anyway, I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yeah." And so she tells me the story. My family's name is Schott. S-C-H-O-T-T. And back in the day, a lot of immigrants to America did not want to appear to be immigrants, and so a lot of them changed their names. But my great-great-grandfather changed his name because he got tired of people calling him Shad. So he changed his name, like many, because Shad actually in German is pronounced Schott. And so he changed his name to S-C-H-O-T-T. And so that people would have a better pronunciation of Edward Schott. But in this moment here, we have Ruth that's coming back, and she ends up literally encountering a family member, a particular family member, who can actually redeem this very difficult situation that Naomi and Ruth are in. And so in chapter 3, we have this moment where Ruth is now, because Naomi says, this is a kinsman redeemer. This is a kinsman. This is an important family member. Do you realize who you have actually encountered? And so this is a moment where at midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman laying at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Now this is Go'al. Go'al. That's Hebrew for kinsman redeemer. And it could be translated as relative and so on. But this is a person who can redeem them because of the difficult situation that they've fallen into. And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich." Verse 11, he is commenting on her character. He's impressed at her character. Sometimes when people are desperate, they don't act well. When people don't feel safe, they make bad choices. He's complimenting her on her choices. Verse 11, "And now, my daughter, do not fear." Notice that word? This is always the deal, folks. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Fear will ruin you. It'll kill you, physically and spiritually. Do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. So what is he saying? There's a family member that's closer to you than I am. So again, you have Ruth, who is being a very chaste, calm, and pure woman. You have Boaz, who is also being a respectful, proper, and following the right rules, a man of integrity. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until morning. There's nothing sexual about this. Nothing sexual about it. What is a kinsman redeemer? Kinsman redeemer is a male relative who, according to various laws of the Pentateuch, which are the first 5 books of the Bible, had the privilege or responsibility to act on behalf of a relative who was in trouble, danger, or need. The Hebrew term goel for kinsman redeemer designates one who delivers or rescues, Genesis 48:16, Exodus 6:6, or redeems property or person, Leviticus 27. Or Leviticus 25. The kinsman who redeems or vindicates a relative is illustrated most clearly, of course, in the book of Ruth, where the kinsman redeemer is Boaz. I want you to see other parts of the scripture where this actually occurs. In Numbers 5:8, "But if the man has no next of kin to whom restitution may be made for the wrong, the restitution for wrong shall go to the Lord for the priest in addition to the ram of atonement, with which atonement is made for him." Leviticus 25:25, "If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer, relative, shall come and redeem what is his, what his brother has sold." Job 19:25. This is one of my favorites. Now get this. You got to understand where Job is. Okay? Got to understand where Job is actually in the same spot that Ruth and Naomi are in. A lot of difficulty and a lot of loss. "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he will stand upon the earth." I wanted you to see where Job's at. Job is right over here just after Abraham. Some people want to make the Old Testament like it's not actually the New Testament. The fact is the Old Testament and New Testament are almost exactly alike. It is always about faith and grace and redemption. And Job makes very clearly this statement. But in 1 Peter chapter 3 and other passages, we see the real Redeemer. Remember, most of the scriptures are archetypes of Christ. Archetypes of Christ. Okay? Verse 18, for Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit. So Jesus Christ is the one who brings us to the Father, brings us to God. Only Jesus Christ can do that. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. For our sake, for whose sake? For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. The righteousness of God. And then Romans 5, 6 through 8. For while we were still weak at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person. Would you agree? Would you die for a despicable person? I don't think so. People will hardly die for a righteous person. Though perhaps for a good person one dare even to die, but God shows his love for us in that while we were still, what? Sinners, Christ died for us. Have you ever had these moments, where the kids are doing really bad things? And you just feel so close and loving to them, you just want to kiss on them, What I'm trying to say is, at our worst moment, okay? And you know what that is in your life. If you go back through the memory of your life, you will remember things that you do not want to speak of. At that moment in your life, Christ died for you. Christ died for you. This is just where I go in my mind. One time, my mom was upset with me. I was about 5, 6 years old, maybe 7. I can't remember exactly. She was chasing me. She was going to catch me. I love playing catch. So I ran from her. There was this little 3-foot wall, stone wall. I could scale it with ease. So I ran, jumped right up on that wall. I was like, I'm heading away from the mean mama. My mom did not make the wall. She did not make the wall. And for the rest of her life, there was a scar and a gash in her right leg. She fell, cut her leg open, and it was bleeding. I actually stopped running because she was crying, and I could see that she was hurt. I hurt her. Do you understand? Do you know what my mom did to me? Not a thing. Not a thing. We just got her to the doctor and got it fixed up. But my mom never spanked me. She honestly never yelled at me. Of course, she was a little busy hurting. But the bottom line is that is what Christ did for you. The cross is not a pretty place. It's not pretty at all. Death is not pretty. We try to make it pretty, but it's not pretty. I want you to understand this thing that happens with Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz is about Christ the Redeemer. It was told about long before with Adam and Eve when God said, the seed of the woman will come against the seed of the serpent. And the seed of the serpent will have his head bruised, but the seed of the serpent will have his head crushed, but the seed of the woman will have its heel bit. So the seed of the woman is going to suffer, but the seed of the serpent is going to be crushed. And that was telling from the very beginning that this problem of sin is going to be solved. And it's going to be solved by one born of a virgin, Jesus Christ. And so there are many songs that are written about this. I will sing of my Redeemer and his wondrous love to me. On the cruel cross he suffered from the curse to set me free. Sing, oh sing of my Redeemer. With his blood he purchased me. On the cross he sealed my pardon, paid the debt, and made me free. Would you stand with me? As we sing this song, I want you to sing it. It'll be right up here on the screen. I encourage you to sing along. And I want you to understand this is a song about the whole of Scripture, but it is a song about Boaz being the kinsman redeemer and saving someone from difficulty. It is called He Lives. Would you sing with me?
God